Hello everybody, welcome to Talks with Adri. Today we're going to talk about the Egyptian legacy. We're going to discuss the mystery of the Great Pyramid and the Great Sphinx. Let's see. So, the idea is to rock with the Egyptian culture and grab the best of them, okay? So let's start. Today it is a very special day because it is not only the talk of the Egyptian legacy, but today as well is the Equinox. So it is all aligned with the information that we're going to receive. If you would like to make your personal rituals at home in order to align with all these cosmic forces that we have been mentioning with the four elements, and just make a prayer of peace, of thanks, of being alive with everything, with being able to flow with life. So I encourage you to do that. And let's start. So here I made an Egyptian timeline where we're going to see that the Egyptian civilization lasted for 3,500 years. That's what it is written in Wikipedia and according to many scientists. But if we're going to see 5,000 years ago, in the pre-dynastic period, they were already, as you can see in this burial, mummies, very developed, pottery, they had mastered the agriculture and the animal husbandry, and they were doing pretty well as a civilization. But it was only until 3,000 years ago when most of all the records were written. And there was this guy called Manetho, according to the Greek name, who ordered the long line of all the pharaohs of the dynasties, and he was going to keep a written record of all the life of the pharaohs. And that's why they say that the history of Egypt starts 3,000 years ago. It is going to be, according to science, in 2,500 the best period of the Egyptian civilization. It is where all the art, the music, the great pieces of architecture were built, such as the Great Sphinx and the Pyramid of Giza. This happened 2,500 years before the Common Era was supposed to be built Giza. It was supposed to be built to be the tomb of Cheops, which is the Greek name, or Khefu, which is the Egyptian name of the pharaoh. Its burial was found inside the pyramid. Then we're going to see that in 332 before the Common Era, Alexander the Great arrived, and it started the Ptolemaic period under the Greek rule. The Greeks were in Egypt during 300 years. But if you see the story of Herodotus, who is going to be the Greek guy that is going to write about the Egyptian civilization, it was already old for his time. We're talking about more than 1,500 years when he's going to say what he believed, in the way that he believed that the pyramids were built. And he's going to take this information, he says, because he went to speak with the priestesses and the priestess of the different temples. And that's the story that he's going to write. But we have a very big gap of the written information about the pyramids. Then we're going to see that the Romans also stayed in Egypt during 700 years. They arrived 30 years before the Common Era, when Mark Antonius had this romance with the famous Cleopatra. And they stayed for a while until 642 years, when the Ottoman Empire entered into Egypt. And with this entrance, all the Egyptian culture completely ended, changing the language and changing the culture and the religion. We have to say that also under the Roman Empire, in around 400 after the Common Era, the year 400, the Christianity entered also as the religion of the empire. So the Egyptian culture, or the Egyptians nowadays, have a lot of influence of many other cultures in the world. Finally, what we see here are the leaders of the Ottoman Empire until recently, that include also the imperialism of the French when Napoleon arrived to Egypt, and the British. And they started all this imperialism also influencing Egypt and grabbing all the treasures, resources, archaeological sites that are now in the museums of all the world, including Germany, Great Britain, France, the United States. And the independence of Egypt happened only in 1922. So it is a very recent nation with a long history of different cultural influences on them. But what if the pyramids and the Great Sphinx were not built in this period? What if these other sources that sometimes mention are right and they were built 5.5 million years ago? So we were saying that what if the pyramids were not built in the time that science mentioned? What if all these other persons or sources that speak about a previous civilization, or maybe help from the beings of the stars to build these pyramids and this sphinx was true? So let's see the facts. And if it is true, then if it wasn't made by men, this happened way time before. We saw in previous episodes that there was this main substance called Num, or the cosmic liquid, out in space, one thing, and that it decides to organize this chaos. And it decided to become Atum, which is the god of the creation. And when he experienced being Atum, he also experienced being Ra. But we have here the Trinity Principle, where the three things are the same, are one. And out of this Trinity that represents the law of oneness, we're going to have the duality, when he separates the sky from the earth. Out of this, with the four elements, we're going to create all the other gods. So the gods were under this big goddess, we can say, that divides the sky or the universe from the earth. And this is very important because if we are going to see, this Trinity represents the change. And this is the Egyptian legacy, the cycle of everything that has life, that it is able to be burned, to identify himself, to be transformed like the sun, and die to be able to rebirth again. So this is the cycle of everything, and it is the Egyptian legacy, the knowledge of the opportunity of the destruction and the rebirth, in the cycles of everything that it is alive. So one of the ways that they represented this was with the sun. You're going to see here that the sun is born, let's say, with the red sunrise of Egypt, and during the day it is going to have his journey, illuminating and giving life to all what he sees on Mother Earth. But later is going to be eaten by Num, and he's going to have like a death. Every day the sun comes out having birth, and then it is destroyed or passed to death. And during this death period of time, he is going to pass through many different obstacles, or let's say more proofs or tests during its journey. And he's going to be victorious, and he's going to be born again. And this is exactly what it means every time that you go into the Egyptian culture, and you're going to see this goddess here is Num, the cosmic liquid that separates the earth from the universe, and is the process of the birth and rebirth of the sun. The transformation, everything that it transforms, being a new being every time, with every cycle. And this is the same cycle that is going to be repeated in every living thing. We also saw the gods, that we're going to see that they are not gods, that's why I put a cross here, also landed on top of the Sphinx, which means that the Sphinx was supposed to be here before, and that they are going to teach the civilization everything that they know, how to write, to read, the agriculture, and this is in the beliefs of the people. These are the myths that they had. This entrance they were able to do it because was aligned with the Pleiades. The Sphinx was aligned with the Pleiades. And here we're going to have the explanation of the Egyptian Sphinx. According to science, we're going to say that definitely it has more than 800,000 years, which it already doesn't match with the theory of being built in the Old Kingdom period that I showed you before, only 2,000 years ago. Why? Because the quarries that they have found and also the erosion of the stone showed that it was built long time before. Nevertheless, we don't have like a precise time of when was the Egyptian Sphinx written. Our other sources, such as Drúmbalo Melchizedek, Matías de Stefano, Edgar Cayce, I'm going to introduce also Claire Hartson, who channels the grandmother of Jesus. We're going to find that the Sphinx had the function of being an astronomical clock, and it was built as a protection, as a defender of Mother Earth. First, according to them, it was built in the period of Leo, of the era of Leo. In that moment, it was an era of courage, of being a warrior, let's say. This Sphinx was not only one, they were two, as you are going to see here. So it was one and against the other one. They didn't have the face of a pharaoh, like a human face. They had a face of a lion, like you see here as well. And this one was the male side. The other one represented the female side. This Sphinx was originally colored in red, showing this courage and this warrior inside it. And Diana Cooper is going to mention that when the consciousness of the beings on Earth is so high, this can work as a mechanism of defense of the planet, because the vibration of it and the whole planet, it is so high that beings that don't have the same vibration or are from lower vibration cannot really enter into our planet. As you know, the Sphinx is pointing or watching towards the Leo constellation and as well towards the Nile River. This is important because, for example, the new year of the Egyptians obviously started with the flood of the Nile River. And these coincides, let's say, happen at the same time when the Sirius star is aligned with the Great Sphinx as well. It happened in cycles every year. The Sphinx was not only with the purpose of leaving the remaining of a pharaoh. It had another great purpose, and it was a purpose of defending Mother Earth. According to Drúmbalo Melchizedek, very recently happened that the Greys that are extraterrestrials or aliens were doing things here on Earth that were not according to our evolution, that were improper. The Incas, the Mayans, and other civilizations that still have the knowledge of all these ancient cultures activated with meditation, altering their states of consciousness, the great disk that it is under the pyramids. This doesn't happen in this dimension, in the third dimension. This happens from the fifth dimension and above. Why? Because these are ethereal battles, we can say. And in the fifth dimension, they were able to elevate the disk that it is under the Sphinx, and according to them, through these other sources, it keeps all the records of Mother Earth, and they were able to elevate it on top of the pyramid, and that's why the pyramid doesn't have a point. It is not that it fell down or because of erosion, it doesn't have it. It is flat at the top, and they put this big disk creating an electromagnetic field, and with this they were able to make the grace go from Mother Earth. So if you would like to have more information about this, I invite you to read the book of the Flower of Life of Drúmbalo Melchizedek, where it is very detailed, all the mathematics, all the sacred geometry that it is behind the Sphinx and how it was used as an instrument or a mechanism of defense of Mother Earth. So this is one of the theories that we have about the Great Sphinx. In any case, it is such a wonderful monument that it is not only decoration or thing, it has a lot of mysteries and things behind. We're going to see that Herodotus, the Greek, is going to mention that this was built in the old time, in the old period. But it has no scriptures or hieroglyphs around it. It is completely, let's say, clean. Nevertheless, there is one scripture that says that somebody that passed through it or around there had a dream, and that the Great Sphinx talked to him and said, I cannot use my entire power if I am buried under the sand. And this guy went to talk to the pharaoh, and it was the pharaoh who decided to unbury the Sphinx and then carved his face. So it was Pharaoh Khafre who is supposed to build the Sphinx, but apparently he didn't build it. He just reshaped the face. It's a theory that we cannot be sure, but this is what the other sources say. What about the pyramids? Science is going to say that they were built by men. There is no hieroglyphs that show how this was done. They are going to mention things such as it was required onions, garlics, things to feed the people who built the pyramids. There are going to be some records, but it is not clear how it was done, how it was designed, who was the architect. These are things that are not explained. And as I mentioned before, the written records that we have about the construction of the pyramids were under the Romans and the Greeks that talked to the Egyptians at that time, but it was already more than 1,500 years later, so they were already old for them. Whatever we say, being science or being these other sources, are just theories. We can't be sure. Nevertheless, the Great Pyramid has some peculiarities. For example, it required more than 2.3 million blocks to be built. The blocks had to be brought from 800 kilometers away. Each block had a weight of 2 to 80 tons. So, if science is going to say, according to these records of the Greeks, that the pyramids were built in 20 years, every block has to be put, every 4.5 minutes they have to put one block working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks in a year without stopping during the 20 years in order to be able to reach this monument. And this talking about only the construction, without talking about the design. And additionally, they really didn't have tools, because if you see, these were the original tools that they had, which were stones, which were ropes, which were copper hassles and tree trunks. They didn't know the wheel, they didn't know the iron, they didn't know the steel. Obviously, they didn't have electricity or modern machinery. So it's still a mystery, and the actual architects and engineers are very amazed of how this civilization with these type of tools were able to build this magnificent monument. We are going to see that the Pyramid of Giza is completely aligned with the magnetic north, which is something very difficult to make. This was only reached by our civilization in the 17th century. It is built with geometrical perfection and also with sacred geometry. It has the ratio of P, we see here, it has the ratio of P, and that was developed by the Greeks, and the ratio of Phi, which is the proportion that it is used in art, that it was discovered in the Renaissance, where most of the living beings and creatures develop with. It is parameter very well expressed in nature, but only discovered until the 16th or 15th century. And additionally, in the hieroglyphs and in all the maths and astrological things that the Egyptians leave, they didn't know the number of pi or the proportion of phi. So this is very strange because the pyramids are built under these parameters. We're going to see as well that it didn't have 4 sides, but it has 8 sides. If you see, there is a little corner here, an angle. Let me show you a little bit more in this place. This is a picture when it was discovered. Soldiers were flying on top of the pyramid and they discovered that in the equinoxes appear these type of shadows. What happens is that in the faces that are north and south, in the time of the equinoxes, in the sunrise and in the sunset, only one of the sides is shown. The other one is in shadow and the other one is glowing. Remember that the pyramids, these are just the ruins of the pyramid, but this was all covered with white stones, like marble. If we're going to see it from the sky, this should have brought with the sun such a strong light that could be perceived in the sky. Maybe it was also very shown on earth, but it was more perceived from above than from below. Other magic thing from the pyramid. When we put one circle outside it, touching the angles, and one circle inside it, and we subtract these measures, we perfectly obtain the speed of light, the same number, exactly the same number of the speed of light. And if you find in Google Earth what are the coordinates, the latitude, the specific point of location of the Great Sphinx also matches with the perfect number of speed of light. People are going to say that these are just main coincidences, but there are so many things behind the pyramid and the Great Sphinx aligned with it that cannot just be by chance. Additionally, the pyramids had exactly the same patterns of construction as the Inca. For example, in Cusco, Peru, you're going to find these blocks that are shaped and carved perfectly according to the shape of the previous blocks. They are not going to use cement or any type of gum or something to stick them. No, they are going to use only the shape of the blocks, and this makes this construction anti-seismical. That's why they are not going to collapse with the earthquakes, and that's why we have the possibility of seeing it today. Also, they are similar to the constructions of Rapa Nui in Easter Island, and if you remember, both of these ancient civilizations were places where the Atlanteans decided to take their knowledge, including Egypt. We are going to find the same methods of construction. The difference is that in Egypt, we're going to find it is not as the blocks that you see here that are completely vertical, but we're going to find them with an inclination of the pyramid. They are not horizontal, they are not vertical, they have an angle. We also saw that they are aligned with Orion's constellation. And not only the Giza, the Great Pyramid, but also the complex of the other pyramids around it. The corners or the angles are aligned with different constellations, with Aquarius, with Scorpio, with Leo, and with Taurus, being the Sphinx also here looking towards the constellation of Leo. And not only to these constellations in the sky, but also it is aligned with ancient temples or sacred places of different civilizations. If we make just a line here from the Easter Island to Nazca, Peru, that we also saw before, to Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, the places that I just showed you, then coming here into the Giza pyramid, continuing into the Chinese pyramids, continuing in the Thailand's sacred places, we're going to find a whole line of sacred places that have similarities. They did happen in different periods of time, but there is a common factor. if we make just this line. And not only to that, these sources are going to say that it existed a different magnetic pole at that time. That the magnetic pole, let's say that the north was here, and that the equatorial line that we call today passed through Giza, passed through this pyramid. So in one moment of time, this was the center of Mother Earth, labeling this equatorial line, and that's why most of the sacred sites were built around this axis. And we're going to see as well that today a line north, it is also aligned with the pyramids of Teotihuacan and with other special sites in as well Thailand, Philippines. So this cannot only be coincidence. There are many things that are happening, or that the architects and the designers of the Great Pyramids took into account in order to build it. These other sources are going to say that what if this monument was not used as a tomb? Instead, it was used to give great alchemy, immortality, and ascension. It was a chamber of transformation. These sources are going to say that it wasn't a tomb and never meant to be it. What it was a chamber of rituals. What it was a technological instrument designed to raise the vibration to reach different realms. So we're going to see that it was used as a place of alchemy, immortality, and ascension. For example, under the Giza pyramid, many of the Rosicrucians had their initiations. Not only them, but also other schools of mysteries are going to maintain secret this knowledge. Under the Great Pyramid of Giza exists an underground city. Not only under Giza pyramid, in the whole complex, including secret passages to the Great Sphinx. And this city has already been proved the existence by Dr. Jim Hortak, who did ground penetrating radars, and he mapped all what it was under this complex. He said that definitely these are constructions that are massive, that are bigger than any monument that we have in modern days, and additionally that it were built more than 15,000 years ago. There is a lot of literature in the ancient civilizations about the underground cities under Egypt. But let's say that they were forgotten with the time, but they say that it was like a complex of labyrinths, especially to protect the sacred scriptures, which is also true. Our sources are going to say that this is the city that doesn't only exist in the third dimension, but also in the fifth dimension, and it is the retreat of Serapia's Bey, the Ascended Master. Here, the people that were once in Atlantis time came here and are still living under the law of one. They take care of all the records of Mother Earth. Additionally, keep the records of the people of the stars that came here to teach us things and to help us with our spiritual evolution. That's the purpose of Luxor, this etherical city that is still alive and working underground, all the Giza plateau. When the persons or the initiated are able to go under the pyramid, and this is something that I can show you here, the pyramid doesn't have only the queen's chamber, the king's chamber, but there is also a chamber under the pyramid. When they go under, they are able to face their underworld, let's say, because all this is dark, and they enter into different consciousness states, and they are going to enter here, and if they have been disciplined and with a lot of mindfulness and meditation, they are able to see all these gods or all these ascended masters, all these people that are helping us through eons of time in order to maintain our records and to help us with our evolution. So in that moment of the civilization, let's say, thought came from Atlantis. This is the story according to Drumbar Melchizedek. And he took the tribe that was there and he taught them how to write, how to read, how to deal with the agriculture, how to develop all the society. He built the Great Pyramids, and not only him, but all these people in Luxor. How they did it? With a very focused mind, concentrated with the charged hands, using the principles of manifestation and telepathic abilities that were possible and existed in Atlantis. For them, this was so easy. And let's remember that the Egyptian civilization made the Great Pyramid, apparently built the Great Sphinx, and started a process of declining, and they were never able to do these monuments or things like this later again. Only with the help of these beings was when they were able to do it. And he gave the people these tools that we're going to find here. The Ankh, which represents the life force. The Jet, that represents a very powerful tool that combines the energy to activate the Merkaba with the 4 elements. And we have this hammer shape that also creates like a whole magnetic energetic field, and these 3 combined create these waves that allow possible all types of manifestation. So these you're going to find in many places. The Ankh represents life. Why? For the Egyptians, there were no 2 types of energy, the sexual energy and the energy. It was the energy. But the energy is born in the genitals. So it was the energy that comes from down going up, and this represents our hands. And then instead of leaving you, this energy, it is coming back to you. And that's why we have this loop here. And re-energizes all your hands and body entirely. This power of the Ankh with the sexual rituals or the tantric rituals, the men should not come, because it was the way that they were going to maintain this sexual energy or their most powerful energy inside their bodies. The central pillar, Jet and Watch, as we see here, represents the central energetic structure of the Taurus. This is the center of the energy point 0, which is like the black holes or the core, the heart of the central sun. This is the energy that we spoke in previous episodes of the nothing, where it is the field of infinite possibilities, when you are able to tap into it. And for this is why we use this jet that you see here, this second one. It is an energetic tool that allows you to enter into this field of nothingness. And the jet associated with the Ankh that I already explained you, which is the symbol of life, that represents the Vesica Pisces. The Vesica Pisces is the duality. If you remember, it was when the first nothingness, right, decided to create himself and creates the second one with the duality. The Vesica Pisces, the union of the thought and the emotion together combined is the Vesica Pisces, which is the zone of the Christic light or the ascended earth in the 5th dimension. But this is not complete because this is going to be ethereal. The only way to make it complete it is with the Was. And what the Was creates combined with the other 2 tools, it is the toroid field. The toroid field is the electromagnetic field of your heart. It is when we open the heart chakra and we completely shift our energy towards compassion and unconditional love. And it is when we feel the unity, when we feel that we're connected with everything that it exists. So it is a physical transformation, an energetical transformation, a chemical endocrine transformation. And Todd is going to say that At that time, the Egyptians needed that in order to transform themselves. But nowadays, we don't need these synthetic tools. We can do it because all the energy of Mother Earth is raising. The level of consciousness of humanity is also raising as well. So we can use our own body as an instrument of transformation. We don't need these tools, but those tools were given by Thoth to the people in order to shift their bodies, to shift their consciousness. So the rituals done with these things were done in the Pyramid of Giza. But it was not only the Pyramid of Giza. The Pyramid of Giza was the culmination point of these rituals and transformations. In the same way that the Nile River goes from south to north, in the same way, the persons needed to go from the temples that are at the south of Egypt, coming up to the north of Egypt, until finally ending up in the Holy of Holies, which was the Great Pyramid of Giza. These temples represented the Kundalini of the body. So in the first center, they have to overcome all their fears. In the second center, they have to overcome everything related to lust and wounds and emotions. First opening all the first three centers and then being able to channel the cosmic energies of the upper centers, and then opening the heart. And this is when the transformation occurs, when you're able to see the different realities, the 5-dimension realities. And at that time is when you reach basically the illumination. When you have been initiated into these steps, you can decide if you would like to be immortal or extend your life in a youth period of time to be able to serve longer humanity in one lifetime. Or you can definitely leave your body and, as you evolved, being able to be a different being, a star or a person in a different reality, in a different dimension, in a different galaxy, whatever, or protector of the sun. We have to see, the Toltecs in the next episode are going to explain it very clear. But after you reach this point of transcendence, you were able to choose what would you want to do. For unconditional love, continue serving Earth, and that's when the people decided to make these rituals of everlasting life and youth. It was not because of the ego that I want to live forever and to stay young. And many of these myths that, especially during the British colonialism, many people wanted to go to Giza to see if they can drink of the elixir of the eternal youth and all this. It is based on this, but the reason behind, the intention was not to live forever, which is ego. It had to come from the heart, and that's why it was not possible for the normal people to do it. It is to open your escape in order to serve for longer time humanity or the beings on earth. So they had to make this circuit around the Nile in the different temples until finally reach Giza in order to culminate this illumination or ascension process. I mentioned before that Osiris was one of the first immortals, or the first immortal of Atlantis, which means that Osiris was the first being that ended this process, and he's going to go to Egypt and he's going to teach the resurrection process, the process of ascension. When we see the Pyramid of Giza inside, we have these three chambers that are called in this way: the chamber of the king, the chamber of the queen. But they were not for the queen or the king. They were for different types of initiations, for your physical body and for your etherical body. We can call it like this. And the underground chambers are where to contact these ascended masters through meditation. In this book of Claire Hartson, Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, it is written that to go under these underground city, and to be able to access into the different temples and into the different pyramids, it was required that you elevate your vibration, and it was through the frequency of your sound, of your energy, that you were able to touch the different walls and they will open or not to you. That's why also the myths of all these traps that were in the pyramids, because if your body resonates with the vibration required to enter into that temple, only by touching the wall it was going to be opened. But if you don't resonate with that, it was not going to be open, and you can just be kept there forever. Also, it explains the passages. It was very difficult to walk because of the inclination of the different passages, and additionally because they didn't have light and they didn't have ways of ventilation. So the initiated had to pass through very difficult tasks. They have to be very disciplined. They had to be in fasting, how to see through the dark, because they had been kept in the dark for long periods of time. So they had to train their body, they had to train their senses in order to overcome their fears before going to be initiated in the Pyramid of Giza. There was a lot of proofs in order to be there. When you go to the chamber of the king, what you find is this. There are no hieroglyphs, there are no decoration, there is only this sarcophagus that you find here and nothing else. It is said that when the people that had been prepared in order to do all this go inside the sarcophagus, and the ritual, and you are going to need a team. You cannot do it by yourself. And the team is of multidimensional beings. The team of the persons that are around you that guided you towards these rituals, and additionally the ascended masters that are going to help you doing these initiations and also putting their energy for you for your own transformation. But when you are inside the sarcophagus, there is a timber around that creates a dome of geometrical energetic matrix that resonates in a way with the cosmic forces, because remember that this is completely aligned with the Pleiades, that you receive all this vibration and all this information and all this energy from the Pleiades, that you start resonating in a different way. There is something special that occurs when you just lay down in this sarcophagus. Napoleon entered into the Great Sphinx. He entered into the chamber of the king and he said, "Leave me alone, I want to be here." He lay down, and when he went out, everybody asked him what happened. He came out with this strange face and he said, "I have nothing to say." No comment of what happened there. So we don't know what he experienced, but he definitely came out with a different face, something that showed that he has been transformed in a way. He was not the same person. Some of the rituals that were done in this pyramid were the alchemy of Horus, the magic of Isis, Osiris resurrection, Hathor's and Sekhmet's creation rituals, Hathor balancing female and masculine energies, high alchemy of many types, rite of the sepulchre to obtain immortal youth, overcome the illusion of death, and many others to reach full enlightenment. But I would like to talk about two, especially two. Well, the first is the Hathor's and the Sekhmet's creation rituals. As many of you know, I studied also Egyptian Reiki, which is called Sekhem. And this is a very powerful source of creation. It is when you learn to master your energy into manifestation. The Hathor's ritual has more to do with balancing your female and your male energy, centered into the heart, and you have to balance your intellect with your intuition. That's basically it. And as I mentioned, there were not two sources of energy. The main source of energy are in our genitals, and that's why we have to uplift from down to up this energy. And it was done through sexual practices. These sexual practices were really condemned and prohibited later when the Christianity arrived and when the Muslims arrived. Obviously, they go completely against their beliefs, their system of beliefs. But in this way, the male and the female, let me just move this for you to see some of the pictures that I have here, were able to become priests or priestesses using their body as a tool for enlightenment. This had nothing to do with lust. The first thing that you had to do was to overcome all these fears, all these judgments that will accumulate in the lower centers, and then free your spirit. After you have done this and open your heart chakra with a lot of respect, with under love, with a lot of mindfulness, everything was required, you were able to have ecstatic or ecstasies, let's say, with the Hathor goddesses, or the Hathors, which are also a consciousness, and have light conception. It is said, and it is written in this book as well, that Mary Magdalene and Jesus were instructed in these rituals. And actually they had light conception children. And both of them were also children with light conception, as it is explained as a myth in the Bible, that Mary didn't have to have like a sexual relationship with Joseph before having Jesus. So that is what it is, a light conception. When the seed is put in a different realm or in a different dimension, but it is born in this planet with a physical body. So you see, all these rituals are for enlightenment. Here is one of walls that represents how Ra became the sun. So Ra was a physical god here, and then he transcended, and then he decided to stay in heaven, and this was the sun. Osiris did it. He did the ritual of resurrection, and Jesus also was trained to make a public demonstration of ascension, of immortality, of being able to die and then to resurrect or to ascend and have life after death. This was required in order for humanity to open the eyes and understand that this is possible. Actually, the Pyramid of Giza had nothing to do with religion. It is a technology based on sacred geometry. It is like a chamber of reconnect with our right birth, with our supraconsciousness, which is our right of birth. With the supraconsciousness, we can make things that are of different phenomena, we can say, supernatural. And one of these things is the transcendence of death. And let's recall, the idea of the Egyptian civilization, the legacy that they give us is that you can overcome death. And that's why all the pharaohs were prepared during their whole life for the moment of death, to live in the Aldila, in the life after death, which is the real life, the eternal life, the life that doesn't change, when you are pure love, pure substance, and pure possibility. The most important thing, and for example, the combinations of these three crystals, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and red carnelian, was overcome the fear of death. And that's what Jesus tried to make, to show to the whole world as a master. The Giza pyramid is very powerful, but it is not the only purpose. It has a greater purpose, not the purpose of only helping oneself. The greater purpose is to be the astronomical clock in order to become an astronomical chamber of ascension, a planetary chamber of ascension. How? Well, the Giza pyramid is also aligned with the constellations that I mentioned in each of its corners. And because of this, and because of the alignment with the Great Sphinx, that it's looking at the beginning of the cycle to the star of Sirius, the observation showed them that each star moves 1 degree every 72 years. And each star takes the whole loop every 26,000 years, the cycle that we were mentioning also in previous episodes. So it means that if I look today through the Sphinx to Sirius, it will take 26,000 years to come back to the same point. What does this mean? And why would this civilization want to call our attention for the reference of this 26,000 cycle? Because humanity needs to be prepared, and not only humanity. All the living creatures and beings on Mother Earth need to be prepared for the destruction and the rebirth cycles. These cycles that happen every 26,000 years. These cycles that are able to shift the poles, the magnetic poles of Earth, changing, shifting the weather, the atmospheric conditions, the magnetism of Earth, making us lose our memory and restart from zero. But if we are able to transcend these cycles, like these masters have shown us, if we prepare our spirit to release the fear of death and we prepare to go on top of the cycles, we will be ready for the Al-Dila, for the life that awaits for us beyond death. And we don't have to end our lives with this cycle. And we are able to keep our memories. And we are able to evolve our spirit. So the great purpose of the Giza complex and all the pyramids along the Nile is to be a great virtual planetary ascension chamber. Because when most of the people reach this new consciousness, it will activate itself. When most of us return to unity, when most of us open our heart and start living in the fifth dimension with unconditional love as a requirement, we are going to turn on this Merkaba of the pyramid, the Merkaba of the Great Sphinx and of the Pyramid of Giza. It is not a synthetic Merkaba. It is a real Merkaba built with the consciousness of everybody. And this will awake many other, the network built by Thoth and the end of Atlantis and kept by the different cultures around the world to uplift the unity consciousness, this grid around the earth. So this is a bigger purpose than only being a tomb, like the scientists say, and for me, definitely, it has to do something bigger than just a tomb. Obviously, all the pharaohs wanted to be trained with this, but let's remember that during the time, so like for the time that the Sphinx and the pyramids were there, and if they were buried, the Egyptian civilization found them, and they believed in these rituals of death and rebirth, and they wanted to rebirth in a better place, in a place in the stars, somewhere more evolved, more enlightened, everything. So that's why they wanted to be buried there. But it was not by dying there or by laying buried there that you reach your own transformation. Your transformation has to be done with your own discipline, raising your energy consciously with your behaviors, changing your thoughts, changing your behaviors, your perceptions, everything. That is the way. It's an active way. It's a way of taking responsibility. It doesn't happen only by putting my ashes somewhere, because then there is not my spirit anymore, as we all know.